Well, we are at 7:03 according to what I have, so we'll go ahead and get started. A couple of items before we roll in case you need to leave early or depart for some reason. We will have a sign-in sheet coming around, and we will also, as advertised, this is a meeting intended to gain some input. So we'll try and be as interactive as possible. If you have questions, just get my attention and I can stop where I am and we can address it. Or if you'd like to wait until the end, I can do it that way too. But we're also going to be passing out little sheets that I'll explain more to you about later as we try and gather some input from you. So first of all, thank you for coming. For those of you that just got here, I did encourage people to move forward so that you can see some of the more detailed information that'll be on the slide presentation. I can share it with you, but if you want to be able to see it and study it a little bit more tonight, you'll want to move a little closer. If I haven't met you, I'm Bill Wilson, school superintendent, and it's my honor to serve you all. And we're here not necessarily because we're looking for things to do or because we think this is a good idea. We're here tonight to talk to you because we have some real need. As you may know, for I think the fourth time in recent years, this past spring we froze salaries, gave no increases. And part of the reason that is that we continue to be in a difficult spot. So I'll try and share that with you, share why we're there, what the situation is, what brings us here tonight, the information that we think we need from you, and the plan that we believe we need to follow moving forward. And we need either a confirmation or a redirection from you so that we are responsive to your wishes as well as to the needs of our kids. So why are we here? Short version is we have a funding issue because of something called the negative factor. Not going to spend a great deal of time explaining the negative factor. We do have some resources on our website from Great Education Colorado that can explain that in detail. The short version is that when the state faced financial challenges, in order to offset those and make their budget work at the state level, they created a factor that was distributed across all schools that reduced the amount of money that we were supposed to get to the amount that we currently get. And the promise and the thought is that when the economy got better and things were better, the funding would be restored. And to that end, you all, I would imagine most of you, many of you, passed Amendment 23 that says, yes, we're in favor of schools, and not only do you need to put the money back, but you need to make sure that you continue to put money towards schools. Well, whether you want to claim a little bit of Gallagher, whether you want to claim a little bit of Tabor, whether you want to blame the legislature, we could spend hours, days debating what the issue is. One thing that we found is that we're, at this point, $10.5 million behind where the state should have been funding us since this all took place. So when you calculate that into our situation, and as you take that as a frame of reference for some of what I'm going to share with you, I think you'll see that there really hasn't been a mismanagement or an over excess of expenditures. We simply have been cut a significant amount of money each year. The other thing that happens is that as this situation occurred, school district administration saw it coming, had to respond, and the typical choice is to try and protect the students from those cuts. And that's exactly what happened in RE2J. Cuts were made, but those cuts were things like we won't buy a bus, we'll wait another year. We'll defer some maintenance. Maybe that roof will last a little bit longer. Maybe we can repair a boiler that should have been replaced or an HVAC system, and we'll limp by and we'll do the best we can. We'll cut anybody who isn't a classroom teacher or absolutely necessary, and so the district has made, almost $2 million worth of cuts over this time, trying to make everything work. And what happens is that works for a while, and I've shared with some of you that I've talked with individually. It reminds me of the old Midas commercial. When it comes to maintenance and fleet in particular, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And it's later, and now we're facing those things. We're $10 million behind on deferred maintenance. We've got an aging fleet that isn't unsafe, but if we don't address it soon, we're going to run into a situation where we're trying to replace multiple vehicles all at once, which kills budgets. Be like, for a home budget, it would be like trying to replace the washing machine and the dishwasher and having to replace the car and trying to make all that work all at once, and we know how tough that can be. The other thing that gets delayed are curricular resources, and for our district, some technology pieces have also lagged behind. Not to mention the thing that I talked about before when it comes to freezing salaries and not allowing any steps or movement. It puts us at a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting and retaining teachers. And I'll go into that a little bit more shortly. Safety issues, as well as loss of support for some of the more challenging issues that we face today. There is more expected of schools today than when you and I went to school. The standards are higher. The expectations of what we do and how we do it have been increased. So we are continuing to face those things, and those costs continue to rise. And I'm here to tell you, if the state was going to save us, if they were going to come riding over the horizon like the cavalry, that would have happened. It didn't. They're not coming. And you can blame whatever it is you want to blame, or you can say they don't need to come. Either way, the forecast for increased funding from the state is not good. And it's just the reality of what we face. I try to be a positive guy. The good thing of what we have is that I believe Brush Schools has a strong tradition of doing what it takes and taking care of our schools and our kids. And some of the reason we are where we are is that in 1950, we built a school. In 1970, we built a school. In 90s, we built a school. And we kind of had to jump ahead a little bit with Thompson. And now we're looking at a middle school that's 65 years old in places. And we're looking at a high school that's already 45 years old. So to some degree, the story just continues, and it's time. But add that to $10 million loss of funding over the last several years, and we end up in a much more critical spot. I think I've covered that. So then we have some options. And one of the things we can do is we can wait. We can hope that the state's going to come through. In the meantime, we freeze salaries. We don't buy buses. We don't fix our boilers. We don't repair our roofs, or we just try and get by. And we continue to offer a substandard environment for our students. And we continue to struggle to attract and retain teachers. Or make cuts, because part of what you'll see when we get just a little bit further is that as the board and I talked, and we went to our retreat this past summer, we talked about the fact that Let's try and do this in 2017. Let's wait a little longer and let's go then. But as we've looked at a 10-year projection, we can't wait. That's why we're here. Some of the things that would encourage us to go now outside of the real pressing ones are interest rates continue to be good. There's more money in available in the BEST program than there has been in recent years. And as we do all this together, there's some bonding benefits that we can gain. Another thing that we can do is make cuts, and I'll share with you what's on the table for those cuts. There's no good way to say this, folks. So I'll just say it in a way I hope we can all understand. We've cut the fat. We're deep into the muscle. And anything that's left is bone. And I shared with the staff, and I've shared with some of you the conversation. Part of the conversation we're having tonight is a conversation I would hope to have never had in my career. But it's just the reality of what we face. If we make those cuts, some of the cuts we're talking about, we jeopardize our entire system. Just so I say it in those clear terms. And if we don't invest in our kids and we don't invest in our schools, then that becomes the next question. Do we want a school, or what kind of a school do we want? And from what I know and my experience is, I believe we want a top quality education for our kids, just like my kids got, or you got, and so forth. So there's what's on the table. And when I say on the table, this is alphabetical. It's not prioritized. But I need you to know these are conversations we're having. And I'll bounce to the next slide, and then I'll bounce back. And there's a reason that number totals at least $776,000. As we looked at our budget, we looked at our prognosis, our forecast, our funding. Some certain things are going to continue to happen. Healthcare costs are going to go up. We have to be able to compensate our people better than we've done. We also have to be able to improve our fleet. We have to take care of our buildings. And so as we look at the things that we have to do in order to be solvent, and here's the part that I don't want to confuse you with, but I want to say, just so that you know part of what I'm talking about. We currently have roughly a $2.8 to $3 million fund balance. Well, for you and me, $3 million is a pot of money. That'd be great. I'd love to be sitting on my bank account with a $3 million balance. For a school, that's where we literally have to be. We're expected to be there. We are expected to hold 20%, if possible, no less than 15%, so that if something happens, we're in a spot where we can continue to operate and cover payroll and so forth. Not to mention, it looks like a lot of money now, but part of why we have to keep that is that we don't get our funding all at once. And so if you would look at our bank account, or if you want to look at our bank account from April, you're going to find that balance was perilously close to zero, because that's how the school funding cycle works, and in order for us to do what we need to do, that's what the expectation is. So just to clear that up, I've heard that we're sitting on a pile of money. Well, I don't think we are, and if we are, I'd love for somebody to show it to me, and we'll use that instead of doing all of this. So these are the things that are left that the state doesn't mandate we cut, that we provide. And like I said, I don't typically like to use this word, but it's a stupid conversation. There's nothing good about it. So again, that's why we're here. That's why we're talking and saying we think we need an MLO. We need that mill levy override. And we think the community, if they know the facts, will agree with us. So that's why we're here. We know our kids need it. So then if that's what we believe, then the question is how much for how long and for which purposes. And along with that, I'm going to back up just a little bit. As we had our conversation and we're talking about the MLO, then we start talking about, okay, then we'd have some money for these deferred expenses, this maintenance and so forth. And as we looked at all of that, you can help me do the math just by doing it in your head. If we're $10 million behind in deferred maintenance and we pass an MLO, how many years, even if we add $500,000 toward that, is it going to take to get caught up? If we add $500,000 a year to the MLO, through an MLO, towards deferred maintenance and capital expenses, how long is it going to take to get caught up? Well, it's going to take 10 years just to get halfway there. It's going to take 20 years to get caught up with where we should be right now. So we start looking and early on had the conversation. We have a middle school that's 60 plus years old. How much money do you want to sink into the middle school? It's had 4 or 5 additions. It's served its purpose. But now we're looking at as much as $8 million just to get it up to where it's supposed to be, mechanical, electrical, envelope, roof, all those things. And the common theme that we were hearing was there's no interest or appetite to put money into the middle school. Okay. So then now we're talking about a bond. And as we look at the middle school that's 60 plus years old and we start talking about costs and we start talking about what would that be and how would we do it, and it's sitting on the revised floodplain, and we start looking at other options, and we start talking to architects and engineers and construction people and planners and consultants and the best grants out there, and we start thinking through the idea that maybe we can actually obtain a best grant to help us with this whole process. Then we start looking at the bond. And could we, should we? And the board looked at a number of options. Architects, planners, engineers put a number of options in front of all of us and said, okay, we need you to kind of prioritize what you think. So we go through the process of vetting each one of those options. And it becomes abundantly clear very quickly that our best options are a combined middle school, high school campus. And part of the reason for that is shared space, shared program, restoration of programs, efficiencies, and so forth. And part of that is not only programmatic in terms of what we can offer our students, but it also puts us in a much better position to obtain a BEST grant. So I'll divert just a little bit. BEST grant. For those of you that have been wondering where the marijuana money went, that's where most of it's gone, at least the stuff that we can get a hold of. So that's out there. Our matching percentage is 47%. So of every dollar spent, we would be expected to match 47 cents. Not a bad deal. Basically a one-to-one match or a little bit better. And the key then would be to obtain one of those. And what many districts do is they obtain the BEST grant and then come back to the voters and say, we have the BEST grant, now would you come and match the money? That's the preferred way that I think we would have liked to have done it, so that we're not having the question to you before we have the BEST grant monies, because we cannot promise that we'll get one. We can promise you we'll do everything we can to get one, and we can write the language if that's the case, to where any monies we spend would be contingent upon obtaining that grant. and we'll get into that a little bit more. But the projects themselves, and we've got a couple of concepts, and I want to make sure you understand their concepts. I don't know how many of you have been through a building project, but if you ever see the original design for a building and then compare it with what actually happens, almost never are they the same. And so I intentionally use the word concept so that we would have a couple of options to look at. And I've continued to work with architects and construction managers and getting numbers and trying to get verified numbers and so forth. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But some of the timing and advantages that we're talking about, now is the time. And if you hesitate to believe me, I don't blame you necessarily, but I'd tell you to look around the state. There's over $4 billion worth of ballot issues across the state for bonds and MLOs. Now is the time. And we're not the only ones believing that now is the time, which from a building standpoint has a tendency to drive the numbers a little higher than we would like. But again, if we're going to do this, our thought is let's do it right. And by us obtaining your support, community support first, that gives us an advantage, a competitive advantage over those districts that would be applying for a BEST grant without that support. So if we already have the voters saying, yes, we support this and here's our commitment, that adds value when we compete with other schools who say, we'd like a BEST grant, and if you'll give us one, then we'll go ask our voters for support. This way they know if they fund us, it's going to happen. Disadvantages are that we're in a short window, and construction costs could be higher. And so our numbers that I'm going to share with you tonight are higher than I'd like them to be. They're higher than I believe that they will be. But as one of our consultants has so aptly put, it's way better for me to underpromise and overperform than to promise something that we can't deliver on. So those numbers are going to be a little bit more inflated than I believe that they're going to be, but they're the numbers that we're going to present to you because we don't want to be underestimating the cost. So then the question is, do you do both? Do you do one? Do you do the other? That's part of the input we want from you tonight. You'll get a slip of paper. One will have to do with the MLO, one will have to do with the bond. If you don't think we should do either one of them, mark no on both of them. We need to know that. If you think we should do one and not the other, then mark that accordingly. We really do want to know. The board needs to know. Understanding, of course, that there's probably only 100 of us here, and so from a board standpoint, they have to account for as much information as they can possibly get a hold of. And we're beating the bushes trying to get as much input as we can. The hard thing is we know that if we put just an MLO out there, then all of our eggs are in that basket, and you only have one choice, and there might be some people that would say, yeah, we can do that. If we put just the bond up there, that to me would be silly, because then we'd have some wonderful facilities and not be able to pay anybody to work in them or to be able to have the kind of programs that we'd want. So then if we put them both out there, they could both fail. I would suggest to you that the bottom line is we think we need it. This building, this auditorium, we cannot have our assemblies in here. It's no longer ADA compliant. So yeah, we removed a couple of seats here, so it looks like it would be. The ramp's too steep. Again, just another one of those little pieces. The building itself We have staff that are working hard, keeping it in pretty good shape. You walk in, you can still see where there are cracks in the floors. We still have wood trusses on this whole, everything that was built in 71, just about is wood trusses. Wouldn't meet current fire codes if you were going to build it today. Not trying to scare you, just trying to tell you the building's 45 years old. And our thought is, we think we have a plan where we can come to you once. It's in the cycle that makes some sense, 50, 70, 90, 2010s. And we can do it at a cost that is never fun to bear, but is reasonable. And it can answer the question so that we don't come back again until it's time to figure out in 20 years what to do with Beaver Valley that'll then be 45 years old. This slide just demonstrates some of the costs. I think I've hit most of them. One of the things I didn't necessarily expound upon is the fact that we're looking at curricular. Some of our curriculum is embarrassingly antiquated. And with new standards and new expectations, we have to do something about them. And they're not cheap. They're certainly not free. Teaching salaries in the bottom quadrant of the state. Here's one for you. The information on the cost of living, I got this from, I can give you the website. It's from the Social Security Administration. Did a little research. Since 2009, Social Security and the cost of living, the inflation rate, has been calculated at a total of 14.3% over those years. Our starting teacher salary has gone up, not a misprint, gone up 2.48%. So not only are we not giving raises, our employees aren't even keeping up with the cost of inflation. Not even close. I mean, that's not even close. That's almost 12% behind just the cost of living. So when you kind of consider what the district has done and some of the choices that have been made, and they've been hard choices, I don't blame anybody. There's a number of districts that have made some of these same hard choices. But at some point, you got to face it and say, hold it, this isn't right. Not only does it make it hard to get good people and keep good people, at a very basic core element, it's wrong. We're taking advantage of people and saying, well, you're called education, and that's just what you get. And I think we need to fix it. I know we do. And I don't see, even Social Security has gone up 14.8% over, or 14.3% over those last 7 years. So then, if the question is, what's it going to be for? What's the specifics? This is an example of what a question might look like. You've probably seen them on your ballot before. If you haven't, that's kind of what you'll see in November. This is what we would want the MLO to be. I don't like to read these things, but some of you in the back probably can't see it. So, firstly, supporting and expanding academic opportunities for students through updated technology, textbooks, and learning materials. Attracting and retaining high-quality teachers and staff through regionally competitive salaries. Preventing further cuts to programs such as art, athletics, industrial arts, and music. Restoring the level of maintenance of all school facilities to extend their useful life. And replacing older buses and school vehicles based on safety and condition. That specifically is what the MLO would address. Those are the things for which we ask you to consider a mill levy override. Will it be that exact language? We're still working on it, but we're thinking that's pretty close to what it'll be. There might be a few little tweaks here and there, but that's about edit number 7 to make sure that that it truly articulated, based on some earlier meetings and questions, what it is we would do so that you know what that money would be for. The second thing about that is we've had additional conversations at the board level about should there be a sunset or not? Should it be in perpetuity? Should we ask for whatever amount that we ask for? Should it be just asked for forever? Or should we put a ending period on it? And what we've come to is we've got nothing to hide. So we plan at this point to put a 5-year sunset out there that says we're only asking for this for 5 years. Now, that's the way the question will read. It'll end in 5 years. In full disclosure, my hope and my prayer would be that it goes on forever. But we will have to come back to you in 4 years and say, did we do what we said we were going to do? If we did, and you like the results, we'd like you to continue it. It'd be a whole lot easier not to even put that on there, just to say in perpetuity, and if we get it, we got it forever. But we don't want anybody to think that we're just asking and we'll do whatever we want with the money. We'll do these things. If we don't, we know you won't say yes again. If we do, we hope you will. The second piece of this that I would want you to hold us to is there's some question based on the numbers as to what is the appropriate level to ask for. 1.5 million would get us perilously close to where we'd want to be, but it would be very tight and it wouldn't take into consideration any of the uncontrolled factors that we have no ability to maintain or fix. 2 million puts us in a good spot. And I would commit to you that based on our conversation at the board level, and certainly for me as a superintendent, just because we would be authorized for 2 million doesn't mean we have to assess it all. Every December we have to certify our mill levy. And we can, at our discretion, regardless of what you authorize us to, we can always assess less if we don't need it. And I would say watch us. See where our fund balance is. Ask questions. Look on the website. Give me a call. Come look in my office. Come demand if necessary. You won't have to demand. You'll just have to ask for that information. We'll give it to you. And we'll show you where all that money went. And we'll show you what we've assessed, why we've assessed it, and where our projected imbalances are. And in return, we would say, hopefully we're building your trust. And 5 years, 4 years from now, when it's time to ask for an extension, that your answer would be yes. So that's where I am. Again, I'm of the mind, let's do it right, let's do it once, and then we won't bother you again. You just check on us and make sure that we did what we said we were going to. And if not, then it's time to fire me and elect new board. We can't take it out on the kids. We've got to make that work. Anybody have questions so far? Question is, have we assigned percentages to each of the bullets? No, we've assigned cost figures. For instance, when we look at the cost of our continuing expenses, on a previous slide, there's $30,000 worth of curricular materials that we need to invest in for each of the next 4 years minimum, probably 5, just to get caught up and then get on a cycle where we're not behind and lagging. And again, hopefully providing for the idea that technology is probably going to be a bigger and bigger part of that. And so using that technology to accelerate learning, and how does that look? Do we need e-books? Are we buying, those sorts of things, or is it purely textbooks? What other kind of learning materials? What kind of programs are we offering? Do we need a CAD program? Do we need a culinary arts program? We need to be able to adjust to our constituency and to our student needs, and so we've assigned dollar figures, but not percentages. That's fair. That's fair. And what we've done with staff, just so you know, the intent would be, and this is how the figure, that's the way in which we arrived at the figure, is that we would immediately, next spring, or in the next budget, if this passes, we would increase our staff salaries by an average of 8%. And again, 8% isn't enough. You remember, we're basically 12% behind. But 8% we think we can do, and then we have a plan for the remaining 9 years of that 10-year plan would be to increase salaries by an average of 2.5%. We're thinking and calculating that inflation is basically at 2%. So if we can go 2.5 over 10 years, we can get caught up. We didn't get here in 1 year. We've been slowly getting there. So I don't think it's reasonable to think we can fix it all in 1 year. But we can fix it over time if we stay committed, stay focused, and do what's right. And the reason I say on average is that some people say, okay, so you'll put 8% on the base of the salaries. No, we have salary schedules. We need to look at those salary schedules and not only address the starting salaries, but also the midpoints of those salaries, and what does it mean to get a step or to switch columns, and are those appropriate and competitive regionally? And if not, make those. So some might not experience a full 8% raise. On average, that's where it would go. Does that make sense? 31,000. We're steady. We had 1 year where we dropped, and other than that, we're steady at least over the last 5. They have, but they've also made cuts. 2 consecutive years cut over $550,000 each year to try and do that. Our fund balance was projected to go down this past year. We didn't go down like we thought we would because there was an increase in the amount of taxes. Again, not a substantial one, but enough to keep us from going down like we thought we would. When was there? We, well, the question was, when was the last time we didn't spend out of fund balance? I have a hard time answering. I mean, from a fund balance standpoint, we've been steadily getting lower. Well, since 2008 at least. At one point we were over $4 million. But again, it's hard to. The reason I hesitate to answer that question is just that. Do you call it spending out of fund balance if you cut $550,000? Because to me, the fund balance isn't just our money. The fund balance is our program, is our staff, is our facilities. I mean, that's all a part of our total net assets, and so we've been steadily decreasing. We have to address it. We've been $10.5 million since the negative factor. That's our share of it that hasn't come our way. We've cut since 2009. One thing I can tell you is we've cut over $850,000 from instruction since 2009. And that's just from instruction. Same number of kids. So take that where you like.
It's fair to assume that all the deferred maintenance costs and things would be considered cuts.
Absolutely, yes. Comment was you could also assume that the deferred maintenance would be considered cuts as well. And they are, because we're not where we need to be, and we have to pay that at some point. Or we just end up with, situation in the middle school. Big rain, ceiling tile comes down, lands on the piano, the electronic keyboard. So now we either go without or we get another one. It's just enough money that it's significant, but not enough money to really turn into insurance because of the deductible that we have to have. Those sorts of things that are just little annoyances that just remind you that we don't have the people, we don't have the resources to do what really ought to be done to avoid silly little irritating things like that add up over time. All right, let's move on, then we'll take some more questions. I shared this with you, our facility options and the things that have been kicked around. The real answer is the best opportunity for us to achieve a best grant and to provide all the things that we would like to provide and think our students deserve is a combined facility on this campus. Now, before I forget, none of the options that we considered knocked down any of the 2005 edition or the current competition gym. So the current high school varsity gym, if you will, the auxiliary gym, the weight room, the wrestling room, those locker rooms, not something that we would consider knocking down. We would leave that part in all options. Again, I'll read this to you real quickly. Addressing health, safety, security, and educational deficiencies in the current middle and high school by constructing a new middle school and high school facility on the site of the current high school, repurposing and renovating portions of the old high school building, modernizing, updating, renovating, and equipping classrooms to promote the teaching of skills necessary to prepare students to compete in the workforce, and raising the outdated portion of the old high school building and the existing middle school. So the idea is one of two options, and I'll go into detail about those. One option is to knock down everything but that portion that I just talked about, leaving that and rebuilding just north of the school here and building that. When that's complete, move the high school students over, knock all of this down, rebuild, bring the middle school over. And again, there are pictures of these concepts, and please, I'll say it again, they're just concepts. Please don't get tied up on any one detail of those. Those are concepts. The goal is to provide an integrated program. For instance, just about, well, certainly home ec and industrial arts have been cut from the middle school. If we have them here and have both the high school and middle school here, we have a space and the opportunity to share staff, and we can reinstitute those programs. That's good for our kids, and as an added bonus, the best grant people like that too, because now our classrooms are used every period of the day. We've reinstituted some programs, and we're able to offer our middle school everything our high school has, or just about. So they all get ag and industrial arts and so forth, like they should at a middle school level. I can tell you from a personal standpoint, if my boys were still of middle school, high school age, and we didn't have anyone at the middle school that is hired to be a technology integrationist or a computer teacher, I'd be jumping up and down asking, when are we going to do it? My kids had one, and that was 10, 15 years ago. That's a disservice to our kids. You can't go on to higher ed. Thank you. You can't go on to higher ed without a computer. And if we teach it at the elementary school and we teach it at the high school, why in the world are we not at the middle school? Well, I know the answer, and the answer is a hard question to answer. The question is, well, we had to make cuts, and because of certifications and schedules and so forth, that was a logical choice. Doesn't make it any better. It just is what it is. If you're confused about the term raising, I know it got me for a while. If you're not used to the term, that means we're knocking it down. So the idea would be to budget to knock down the middle school. Just knock it down. There's a reason we're not using it, not wanting to use it. There's significant issues there. If for some reason the city says, hold it, we'd like to have it for our rec department, we'd like to keep at least the gym, and we plan to do that, and we want to keep the tech building, we're not opposed to that, but our plan and our specific language would be to knock it down. If the community comes around and says, hold it, we think we can make this a rec center, then we're fine to partner with that. But our plan is we're not going to leave it standing. We're going to knock it down. We're going to budget that way.
This is better yet. That's it, folks. Have a good night. Give me an opportunity to take a drink of water. Take a question or two while they're changing the battery if you'd like.
Mr. Wilson, you just mentioned a couple of industrial arts things, but can you identify some cuts that have already been made that you see highly beneficial to restore? And is there things in the event MLO passes that you will be able to restore some of those? But
Question is, what's been cut that we could hopefully restore and what would be those benefits? I mentioned the technology piece of it. I would also say that we have hamstrung ourselves in many ways. If you look at our test scores and even our graduation rate, although we're working on them, they're not where I would think they should be. Part of that is that we cut all or most what would be considered legally non-essential people. And when you start thinking about the fact that we would cut $1.2 million in 1.1 something in 2 years and approaching 2 million over the last several. And then we're talking about restoring roughly $600,000 of that. We are talking about the fact that we have some lost opportunities. Middle school is supposed to be a time of exploration and to kind of see what you like and what you do. We've got a great ag program at the high school level. Middle school kids don't even get on. If they do, then we've got to figure out how to make all that happen. And to some degree, we've done some maneuvering to make that happen. And with some of our recent hires, we've been able to re-implement some of these things. But again, it's not a consistent, directed, sustainable situation. So we need to put those back into place. We need to be able to look comprehensively at our programs. What do we offer? Well, do we offer enough honors programs to challenge our upper level kids? Do we offer enough of the...
Do we offer the opportunity to extend for those kids? In some areas, we have AP Spanish and we have AP History. That's it. What about concurrent enrollment classes? We have some of those. Do we have them as fully as we'd like? No. Do we, at the other end, take care of some of what you saw up there would be MTSS? We're already struggling with having enough ability to help those students that need just another boost. So when we start talking about restoration, I could probably spend the rest of the evening and we could go through it subject area by subject area. But where we are right now is we're really doing math, science, English, and history. And now we're still able to do visual arts and part-time industrial arts and ag and music, but only at the very basic levels. So we're not offering any variety or any extension to our students. So those students that are interested in a particular area aren't being served in a lateral sense, or in some ways in a hierarchical sense, to be pushed to their full capabilities. We don't have those abilities. And we're not asking to be all things to all people, but I just take you back to your high school days, and I know, at least for me, and I wasn't in a wealthy community when I grew up, we had tons of options. And we don't offer a CAD program here. It's just not something that's even in the conversation. Well, it ought to be. We don't offer anything other than basic visual arts. I mean, there are some variations of that, but to really take a student and hit them where they live and get them excited about things, there aren't many programs we have that we're able to do that. So when we look at it, it's not like we're denying our kids a basic education, but we're not competing well with others. And so, that when your option is to say, yeah, if you'd like that, well, enroll at Fort Morgan, they can take care of you. I don't know about you, that didn't sit very well with me. And I haven't been here very long. That catch it? There's more to that, and I honestly spend 30 minutes with you on that. These are a couple of small versions of that concept. What I started to tell you is that we have a couple of larger versions out there to take a look at that have been posted outside. So take a look on your way out. You may want to take a look before you make a determination on that sheet of paper that has been distributed to you. What I want to talk about is sort of the advantages, disadvantages of each concept, but with the numbers that I received today from the construction company in terms of what they think. I'm going to go through it very briefly, and then if you want me to, say, hold it, we want more detail because we want more detail. There's a list of like I say, advantages, disadvantages. I will tell you that I thought one of the advantages of the renovation plan where we kept all of our building and just made it better would be a lower cost. But the way the numbers came in today, the higher cost would be at $68 million. The lower cost is at $58 million. And you say, hold it, knucklehead, $10 million, a lot of money. And it is. But if you look at this, part of our match with BEST would be about 50%. So if you take the 50% match off, now we're talking about a $5 million difference. Then, if you consider the fact that our energy company, in essence, shoulders 75% of our taxes, that leaves us with the remaining 25%, and so the actual difference between the $68 million and the $58 million is $1.25 million across our community over 20 years. And to me, that's not even a question. Would you renovate a building that's 45 years old and save yourself a little bit of money, or would you go ahead and go with the new building that'll serve you for sure for another 50? To me, there was really no issue. So based on the information I got tonight, I've chosen at this point not to go into the advantages, disadvantages. Does somebody want further advantages, disadvantages? Happy to do it. And I don't want you to think that this is a staged situation, because to me, my best experience with this is to take the older building and make it better, because the cost is typically a huge saving. In this case, it's not.
Not expect you to have the actual numbers, but just put that in perspective for us that don't have those numbers. You're talking about probably, as that relates to the assessments of maybe a buck, buck and a half a month to a
Cool.
household.
Yeah, the question is, what would that be for a typical homeowner? And the difference is pennies. I mean, it's not even 50 cents. When we start talking about bonds and you start talking about the difference between 20 million and 30 million and 40 million, the actual numbers per assessed value for a $100,000 home or a $120,000 home, the difference between, say, 20 million and 30 million is the difference between $2.24 and $3.52 a month. So if you're talking just over a tenth of that, what's that? It's like 13 cents. Is that what you get? Yeah, 13 cents. So to me, 13 cents a month, the question really is yes or no, not the lesser or the greater. Does anybody want further? I mean, there are some other things. If we do the knockdown of this part, there's virtually no disruption to the educational process. We pass the bond in November. We get the BEST grant next spring. And then once construction starts, it all starts over there. The high school continues to attend school here, middle school there. We get that built, get a certificate of occupancy, move the high school kids over, knock this down, start building, move the middle school kids over, knock the middle school down. Now, there will be some inconveniences and some displacements here and there, but the actual true educational process won't be disrupted in any significant way. Yes, ma'am. Question is, the BEST grant gives us how much? That number will change. Last year, our number was 47%, which would mean that if we had obtained a BEST grant last year, they would have given us 53%, and we match 47%. It is all calculated based on your unique circumstance. Our situation will change a little bit, but not expected to change significantly. For those that were highly impacted by gas and oil, theirs might change significantly, but all indications are ours might change 1% or 2% one way or the other. But I think I'm confident that we're safe to say about 50-50 would be the worst case scenario. I'll tell you what, I think I do, but I'm going to let Mr. Scott Newell, who is with us from Cooperative Strategies, he's part of the team that we've assembled to pull all this together, and he's the former director of the BEST program, so I'll let him answer that.
Who else loves talking in the microphone to people? So yeah, I'm Scott Newell. I'm the former executive director of the Division of Capital Construction, which administers the BEST grant. By statute, each school district has several factors that make up its match. So every school district in the state has a unique match. You can safely say Aspen, a very affluent district, has a 90% match, and you have some that actually have a 10%. So when they look at factors, they look at per pupil assessed value, free and reduced lunch, median household income, your bond success and failures over the last 10 years, unreserved general fund, and there's one more. So all those get wrapped up, and then you get prioritized statewide. So, let's say the free and reduced lunch percent is 33% statewide. Where your school district sits on that, if you have a higher free and reduced lunch percent, the match goes down, and vice versa. So they take all those factors, roll them up, and that's how each district gets to a unique match percentage. I can't tell you the difference between Fort Morgan in here specifically, but that's kind of how that is made up. Make sense? I can answer any other questions specific to that before I give it back to Dr. Wilson.
Yes, sir. Again, wanting to under-promise and over-perform, there are some variables through which we have limited control. One of the things that provides best with additional funding capabilities is that they may choose to bundle a number of their grantees, and so that would slow the process in terms of actually receiving those monies. So instead of, best case scenario, we break ground next May. Might be delayed a year if the best monies are tied up in that process, because then if that's their choice, then they'll have to wait till November to see if November of 17, to see if those other districts that they have granted provisionally pass their bond or not. So best case scenario says we start the summer of 17. We have high school students over there by the following fall, which would be 18. We knock this down and have middle school people in here in 19. But I wouldn't want to promise that. I would want to say that we would be done and everybody would be in their spots by 2020, the fall. So it'll be at least a 2-year process and possibly 3 from the time that, where we currently stand.
Quick question for Scott. By going the other direction, in other words, passing the bond and then applying for the best grade, does that alleviate some of our possibility of being bundled with other districts? No. What is referring to?
Hold on just a second. The question was, we're also taping this so that it can go on the website if people want it and so forth. So the question was, by going to having this done and then achieving the passage of the bond and then going to the best grant, does that alleviate or somehow keep us from necessarily being bundled? The initial answer was no, and the explanation is.
So the state can fund projects in 2 ways. They have cash, and if they fund this project with cash, in May, that cash is available, and you can begin. The reason BEST has more revenue now is because this last legislative session, we passed a bill that increased their financing cap. So if this project is awarded a lease purchase grant, there regardless has to have a financing due diligence process. There's environmental surveys, alt surveys, resolutions, basically a period just like if you were going to buy a house to get all your paperwork in order. That usually takes 3 to 4 months to do. At the same time, there's school districts that will be contingent upon a November 17 passing of their ballot to provide their source of match. So they do their closing on all of those usually at the end of November or the first week in December. So the problem with that as far as the school construction schedule is concerned is you don't really want to break ground in Colorado in winter. So optimistically, we can design, get everything going, get a cash grant, open up a year earlier. Otherwise, we're going to have to delay that process. Additionally, you're not allowed to, if you do finance it with the state, you can't start incurring expenses prior to the issuance of those bonds due to some IRS regulations. So that's kind of where we're sitting with timing. And it's a little out of the control until May when they determine how to fund it.
Additional questions? So let's talk tax impact. I alluded to it earlier. As we did our forecasting over the next 10 years, there's a whole list, and again, we'll provide it to you as much as you want in terms of how those costs are broken down and so forth. But as we made our projections, the short version is that with a $1.5 million MLO, we can address needs and in 10 years be just below the fund balance that we currently have by percent. We would still have some, but it wouldn't be, again, if there were any hiccups in the system, if there were any changes from the state, if there were any additional costs or changes, we would not necessarily be prepared to adjust to those. And kind of, it's kind of that household budget that I think we've all had at times where it's like, if the washer goes out in the next 10 days, we can't even get one on credit until the first of the month. We'd be in that type of situation. The $2 million would be a little more flexible and provide us some, what I would call contingency or some cushion in case bad things happen. And I bolded what that would do in terms of a tax increase for the homeowner per month. So that at 1.5 million, it's $4.20 a month. At 2 million, it'd be $5.59, and at 2.5 million, it's $6.99. And I don't mean to ignore the 2.5 million. If that's something you want, tell us, and we can work on that. But I feel a little funny promoting that because I don't think we need that. This form is also on our website, and I'd be happy to provide it to you if you need it in paper copy as well. The bond issue tax impact, here's where life gets a little more interesting. With the numbers that we thought we were going to have and the initial numbers that we had talked about with the construction company before they crunched everything the way that they have to crunch it and the way that they have to plan, as we've talked about, this project may not be done for 3 years from now. What are construction costs going to be in 3 years? Well, that kind of depends on how much of the $4 billion in tax or in ballot issues pass. If that's the case, and there's all these projects out there, that's going to drive the cost of construction up. So we have to address that, and they have to plan that way. So here's really what our option is. And our option is if we go with that reconstruction where we knock down all of this except for the 2005 edition, knock down the middle school, then we're looking at a $68 million project. Well, we're not bondable to $68 million. So the issue would be that the language of the actual question would be that it would be contingent upon securing a BEST grant. And so we would be looking at a $68 million project, and let's just be conservative. Let's say that based on our best opportunity to get as much of the best money as we can, we only ask for $30 million. Only. Big number. So then our cost would be 38. Ideally, we will ask for half, and our cost would be 34. But again, just for math's sake, That would put us per month at somewhere between the $352 a month and $558 a month per $100,000 assessed valuation for the homeowner. And again, I'm only talking homeowner, so if you're a landowner, obviously you're going to be taxed accordingly and a little more heavily. At the high school? Today or yesterday, what do we have? 450. Those two grades this year are right about 200. We've got 465 of them at Beaver Valley, which would be 3rd through 6th. And then Thompson hasn't fully started, but again, we've got another. We'll continue to be, our student population will be over 1,500. Our actual student count's a little less than that because they don't count everybody is full. That's certainly a possibility. Part of our 10-year plan is that we have to address all potential situations. And so, yes, when we build, if we build, I say when because I think it should happen, and I tend to be a little bit optimistic. So the facility would be built to where it could house the 6th grade or accommodate growth. I mean, part of what we're talking about, folks, is this is a building that's going to be here for 50 years. So we have to think, is Denver going to come this way? Are we going to grow? Is housing going to make its way this direction so additional people can live in our community? I don't know that for sure, but we have to plan. And so this facility would facilitate our current 6 through 12 and still have space. And that still leaves us options if we did do that, because part of what we may do, typically growth comes from the younger grades up. And so if that's the case, then maybe the first step really is that we need more space at Thompson. And so the 2nd grade leaves Thompson, moves to Beaver Valley. 6th grade then needs to move. And if we feel like that's the best overall configuration for our kids and programs, then that's where we would go. But right now, we just want to leave ourselves that flexibility. The data, I guess the specific answer for your 6th grade question is we don't have enough data right now to know whether or not we want to move them back or leave them where they are. Somebody else had a hand up someplace. Did we answer? Okay. What we think is the area that we hope is palatable for our community is that we keep it at or around $10 a month per 100,000. If you add a $2 million MLO to 30-something million in bonds over 20 years, we'd be right at or around $10 million or $100, $120 a year, $10 a month per 100,000. The goal would have been lower, and there are parts. I will tell you this just because as I look at construction costs, I know that the companies that do this scope of project base all of their considerations on coming out of Denver and where are we going to get workers, and are there going to be actual people available to do this work. Part of what we've been talking about today is we think we can do better than some of the numbers they're giving us because we've got good local people. And we can benefit on that, and we can keep the money in our communities. Now, I don't think there's anybody that would argue they're based in Brush and able to take on the scope of the school that we're talking about, the size that we're talking about. But there are certainly subcontracting points or pieces that can certainly be siphoned off, reduce our costs, keep the money in the community, and probably even get a better, not only a better rate, but a better product. Yes, sir.
What's the percentage of
question, kind of a multifaceted one, is what's the percentage of retirement and fixed income? I don't have the fixed income part. I can tell you that roughly 36% of our community is over 65. Now again, where you retire, but yeah, we're at we just got a thing from Morgan County, a flyer from them that kind of had some additional updated information, and it had brush in 2014 as from 50 and up, we would be at 40%.
Problem I see is all the people that are here are probably of the age that they have children still in school, grandchildren, whatever. There probably are a lot of people that don't. And how are we going to reach those people and convince them in the same way that you're trying to convince us?
Well, the comment that I would have, and the one that I've talked with people about some, is true. In some ways, I'm in that boat. My kids are grown. My grandkids aren't likely to be in brush. Granted, I work for the district, but ultimately, what kind of a community do you want for brush? And talk to Linda Thorpe, the CEO of East Morgan County Hospital. Where's one of the first, if not the first place she brings her recruits? She comes to school. If we don't have good schools, healthcare providers don't want to be here. Now we're talking serious biz to retired folks, because that's critical information. That's critical stuff. Is it going to cost us more as retirees? You know, again, if I retire here, hopefully in 15 years, we'll still be paying for this. Well, is it more expensive to pay $10 a month for it? Or is it more expensive to go to Morgan every time I had to have a doctor's appointment or need health care? You know, we're not talking about closing the hospital overnight, but it's a cycle that begins. And if you don't believe me, just ask some of the smaller towns around how it all started. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. For those that didn't hear, you know, one of the components that again, this goes back to the fact that we're having a silly conversation in some ways. We start talking about cutting sports and art and music in particular, and we think we're saving money. For instance, prime example. We spent roughly $45,000 on middle school athletics last year. Okay, that's $45,000. That's a piece of the puzzle. Well, there's 45. Now we just need to find 45 a few more times, and we're good. Well, the problem is that our state funding, again, just for math sense, is just over $6,000 a student. So all it takes is 7 kids or 7 families with kids in middle school that say, my kid's going to be in middle school athletics. That's important. Or, you know, again, we can talk art and music, but this one's real easy. So we lose 8 kids from middle school, just 8. Not enough to cut a teacher, doesn't necessarily change our class sizes dramatically, but the cut that we thought saved us $45,000 now just cost us money, and now we're that much weaker of a program with that many less interests for our kids and opportunities for them to learn outside of the classroom, keep them interested in school, whatever the story is. So you're absolutely right. You take music and art out of our program, and you know there would be those that would argue it would be a very short time if we have to make those cuts. We'd be a 1A school. And again, if that's what we want, then that's what we'll be. You know, I don't say that as a scare tactic. I say that as my job and your board's job is to make sure that our school is sustainable. And at our current rate and with the current things that we have to do, and because of the choices that we've made that have helped us to buffer some of these things from our kids to this point, we're coming to a critical juncture that says, now's the time, folks. And that's why we're here. Conventional wisdom says if we were going to do any of this, we should have started back in January. If we could, you know, part of the challenge again is you've had a turnover in leadership and administration and so forth. And if I would have come in and jumped right in January and said you got to do all this, I'm not sure anybody would have listened, and I certainly wasn't as prepared to do that as I am now, as I've had a chance to get a lay of the land and really take a good hard look at where we're headed. So yeah, the options of cutting, I would suggest, are not a wise option in the benefit of kids and families. Which again, when we start talking about what kind of a community do we want, there's that big part of me that says, yeah, it's a money issue. Some of it's a value issue. What do you want for Brush? What do you want for your kids? What do you want for your community? I know what I want, and I kid you not, I would love to stay here the rest of my career and retire here and so forth. You know, we have a nice little golf course, we have nice people, you know, why not? But part of that is we also have a good school system and we provide opportunities for kids. And, you know, there's a beet digger pride. How many beet diggers you know besides a brush beet digger? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah, the question is, what about early childhood education? First of all, I would say the state only funds half-day kindergarten. We offer full day, and that's partly because you all knew that was important and passed an MLO for that a number of years ago. We also are in the process as a school district of attempting, and it's a convoluted process, but we're attempting to become the grantee for the Head Start program, which is currently operated through the United Methodist Church. And so we're still committed to that. Preschool is, for the most part, separate funding in terms of how that affects salaries and so forth for the people that work there. Again, it gets confusing because some of those people are paid through a federal grant and are guaranteed a cost of living increase, and yet they're doing the same job as some of the people that are hired by the district. And so we're working through that, trying to make sure that we can create a situation when we do take it over that we can fairly compensate people. But as far as were they on the list of things on the table to eliminate, at this point, no, they're not. There wouldn't be enough savings there. A couple other things that are conspicuously absent from the list. Somebody says, well, hold it. VOAG's an elective. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do business. You don't have to do any of those courses. The FACS courses, what used to be home ec. Well, at the high school, those are what we call vocational ed classes, and there are revenues that we receive on those particular classes and in that particular department. So there's a way to recoup some of those costs, and so cutting those really isn't a major savings. Another question? The next piece of what we think is going to take place is based on the input we've gathered and the input we get tonight. The board is scheduled to meet on the 31st. And by the way, I think I neglected to say this before. For purposes of the open meeting laws, the sunshine laws of Colorado, we do have, I've seen at least 3, I think we have 4 board members here tonight. This is not a formal board meeting. They're here as interested citizens, and There will be no formal business taking place. There is no agenda. They will not be meeting after we're done or any of that tonight. So this is not a board meeting, and there is no agenda. So I want to make sure and get that stated as I'm supposed to. But they will meet next Wednesday. And the goal would be to certify our language so that we can get that. It has to be done by the 9th of September into the county clerk so that we can be on the ballot and so forth. We've done all the things up to that point. And so that's the plan. And what they have to decide is, first of all, yes or no. All indications so far have been yes. But a couple of questions are, how much on the MLO? For how long? Should there be a sunset? And then on the bond, yes or no, and really it's yes or no because the other options don't appear to have as much weight or advantage to us. So what you have in front of you are a couple of them, a couple of sheets, 2 sheets. We've got additional pins if you don't happen to have one, and we'd like you to, if you would, you don't have to put your name on it. If you want to, that's fine. If you got comments or you want me to call you or you want to set a meeting and get further information or whatever it is that you think you want or need, write down those comments and then put a mark next to the one that you think we ought to do. It's not a vote, it's just your input. On the bond, there's supposed to be a little mark there by contingent upon securing a BEST grant, but that answer was given to us earlier today when the numbers weren't significantly different between the higher one and the lower one. The thought was coming in initially earlier today that we would say, would you give us permission to go for the more expensive version? And if we don't get the BEST grant, we do the less expensive version, but there's not enough difference between the two that makes any sense. So this one is more of I think it's a yes or no question. It's either mark no that you think it's a bad idea, or mark the $68 million one. And again, that $68 million would say contingent upon a BEST grant that would, and again, the wording will be more sophisticated, but essentially that says we'll have a matching BEST grant. So we'd be looking at an obligation on behalf of our community to be somewhere in the $34 to $38 million range. It'll be specific on the wording, on the actual question. Okay, I didn't do very quickly tonight. I apologize. Questions? What we've tried to do is not let that happen. Now I think it is happening. So yeah, I think you're right. We still have
By quarter.
I think by quarter is that right? They rotate. But again, that's an example of things that have been cut. Another example of things that we can restore and should be restored is you would think that we were trying to drive people out of the business because we've got a librarian that's trying to take care of 2 libraries on separate campuses. Again, another one of those things. Well, it's better than cutting a classroom teacher. Well, okay. Doesn't make it any better for our kids if they can't check out the books they need or get the help they need and the resources. So Right. Yeah, that goes back to that whole part of the question was restoring the programs, goes back to Mr. Miller's question, yes. Yeah, see, there are places where programs haven't fully been cut, and so from a community standpoint, if you're not intimately involved, it's sort of like, well, no, they're okay. They said they were going to have to, but they didn't. Okay, we're not kidding around this time, folks. I can guarantee you. There's nothing else left. Those things that you saw on the list, they have to total that amount of money. And I'll speak to that real quickly because I should have earlier. You say $776,000, what are you thinking? And if you did that, you don't have to do that all at once. Well, you're right, we don't. But I would ask you, if we need to be solvent, if we need to cut that amount to be solvent in 10 years, the less that we cut each year, the more we have to cut the next year. And for me, working in an environment where we look around and cannibalize one another every spring to see who's next on the list is not a good working environment. It's not good for kids. It's not good for employees. And instead of keeping good people, they're going to leave before their program gets cut. First opportunity they get to go someplace where they know they have some sustainability, they're out of here. And then we're in a mess. And that's the program that then gets cut, even if we would have chosen differently. And really, we shouldn't have to be choosing between any of them. I mean, there's none of those things on that list should even be considered. It's just unfortunate. Yes, sir. Thank you. And let me speak to that real quick, and then I'll get back to you. A couple things that sparked some thoughts from those comments. One is we've cut 27 people, 27 positions over the last number of years, and the number that we're talking about now includes at least 15 more. And so again, that's an economic driver for our community, as well as house values, as well as, again, the type of community we want to be. Another piece of that is that, again, we're happy to have you join us at board meetings. We're not trying to hide anything. We're on the TV and sometimes are on the broadcast. Sometimes you may not be able to hear us quite right or anything. We've got them all recorded. All of our numbers, our audit was just completed. We've got another one that'll be coming here in September. So anybody that tells you things that you aren't quite sure of that raises questions, I would encourage you to encourage them to come take a look, or to come take a look for yourself, or both, so that when those comments come out, we're all armed with that. And I think that's the other piece of this, is that one of the things that you will see, and it's by law that it's going to happen, is that my face and my energies will not be able to be public in any promotion of these ballot questions. By law, once the certification takes place on September 9th, I'm information only and can answer unsolicited questions, but short of that, I can't, and neither can any of our administrators. And our employees will need to be very careful that they're doing what they do in support of it, if they do, on their own time. So there will be a little bit of a change, and it's not like I've just fallen off the face of the earth, but I can't be doing this. But that goes back to that other part of, if this is going to happen, then yeah, we've got to have those conversations with some of these people that it's not going to be easy to talk to. And we're also going to have to talk to people that are intentionally unaware of our situation, or unintentionally, and say, hey, first of all, we need you to register. Doesn't take long. You can do it online. Second of all, that ballot, if you get registered before October 15th, for sure, it may even be a little later than that, that ballot will come right to your house, and you just simply need to check the box and mail it back. So, there's that whole element of it's going to take the whole community, is what it amounts to. Sir.
I just wanted to tell Don, I wish I could share your optimism. But 2 years ago, we were doing the same thing, and we didn't even close to last. And the community hasn't changed that much. I have as much media coverage as anybody, and I'll tell as many senior citizens and people that I know last time that were up against it this time of the meeting, because those are the people coming out of the fence, not the people sitting here. It's the people who are intentionally not, or unintentionally not, to consent. And we got to make sure as this group gets to them, because if we don't get to them, it ain't going to pass.
And we are mobilized. Just so you know, we do have a steering committee. They've taken the name Keep the Beat Alive, and you should be hearing about them and from them. Our co-chairs are right here, Jeff Lancaster and Pat Walters, and there are a number of the committee members. In fact, so I don't miss somebody, would you be willing to stand so that people know who to race up to and say, how can I help? And their goal, I can tell you, we've already met on several occasions. Their goal is just those things we're talking about. We're talking about Beat Digger Pride. We're talking about providing for maybe someone else's kids, like somebody before us provided for ours. And what kind of a community do we want? Obviously, none of them are paid, and they're doing this all of their own time, their own volition. And if you can help and want to, we're certainly able to put you in touch with them. If you're not sure who they are or how to do it, we're happy to help. So, yes, ma'am. What is the class size at the elementary level? Primary, we do our best to keep it under 20. That would be... And again, the goal is to keep them at 20. But that's one more position and at each of those levels that we're not able to have right now. Including the part-time? Roughly 220. Roughly 220. Allie, do you know exactly? What's that? Look at that. I got one. Yes. And if there's something you want to know that you don't know in regards to this or anything about our schools, please ask. That's our job. We're here to serve you and the kids of this community. So if there's something that's not clear or you need to know, let me go here and then I'll go right there. Yes, sir.
I just want to add to those comments a little bit, and I think one of the things that resonates with people in our community, and I want to commend you. I want to commend you, Dr. Wilson, and we need to make this known amongst our community, amongst the members that will be making a decision on the ballot, is that the transparency level on this is probably as high as we've ever seen in this community. And I do think you deserve a round of applause for that. And just as you alluded to, the doors are always open. My experience is that I have the right to walk in and ask you any question in the world, and that's very important along these lines, that the transparency level is very high. But furthermore, what I see in this and what we need to express to folks amongst our community is that this is not a Band-Aid. And I think a lot of some of the confusion or unsettlement on some of the other movements has been that it seems somewhat like a Band-Aid. What I've had the opportunity to see is that this is a projection that takes us 10, 15 years down the road, and it really is a long-term investment in our community.
All right.
Okay, the question is, if this thing sunsets, and the answer is no, has the board put safeguards in place? I would say the 5 years of the MLO, well, and it'll only be 4 because we'll need to come in advance the way the taxing system works and so forth. That will not solve our issue. The reason for the sunset is to say we need it, we're going to use it for those specific purposes. We really need it until the state does something different or until the entire formula is changed. We're just going to promise to you and give you the ability to hold us accountable to say this is how it's going to be used. Because if we do the things that we need to do, we need to use that money right now. There won't be any saving of that money. And that's where I'm talking about, even as we talk about how much funding and how much taxes we levy. If we're at a spot where we're above the fund balance that we need, then we'll have very poignant conversations about, well, what we talked about is not levying any more than we need. Do we levy it or do we not? The question is, what safeguards would the board put in place so we're not back here in 5 years? Ma'am, I don't think there are any. We are $10 million behind in deferred maintenance alone. 1.5 million times 4 doesn't get us anywhere near 10 million. So we will be back. The question will be, did we earn your trust enough to continue this? I don't want to pull any strings and say, hey, you do this for 5 years and we're good. We're not. Now, 5 years gives opportunity for the state to do something different. They may change the formula. It may be unconstitutional to have the negative factor, and we get our funding, and on we go. But to think that essentially 4 years of $1.5 million is going to allow us opportunity to put into place safeguards, it's not going to happen. It's not mathematically in the cards. Because the only way we could do that would be to do that and make the cuts so that our costs are less. Well, we can't cut. We already aren't paying our people. We got to give them at least a cost of living increase of some sort. We need to give them that 8% just to be able to look them in the face. We need to buy another bus. You know, our activity bus, not overly excited about that thing. We need another one. You all know, some of you rode on it. I mean, it's the truth. So, I don't want to make any false promises, ma'am. The thing that I can tell you is if we pass the MLO and we're able to use it for 10 years, 10 years from now we'll be in good shape. If we pass the bond and we get our best grant, we won't be talking bond, barring any major catastrophe, for 20 years. This bond will be paid off, and it would only be wise at that point for whoever's in the board and administration seats to start talking about, okay, hold it. Let's pay attention here. Maybe we need to talk to our people because Beaver Valley's 45 years old. We may need to do something, and once this bond is paid off, we could continue without raising anybody's taxes. But there wouldn't be any need to do anything for 20 years at least. We'd have a middle school, high school that should be good for 50 years. And with the MLO, have the increased ability to properly maintain and extend the life of those buildings. So, we do think we have a long-range plan. But the long-range plan truly, with complete disclosure so that there's no confusion, would involve that MLO eventually becoming permanent, unless someplace else. Part of the reason we're here is that we've been cut more than $1.5 million a year, trying to serve the same number of kids with increasing costs, including health care and so forth. Yes, ma'am. Question is it the intention to make them separate? Legally, we have to. The MLO will be listed first. The bond will be listed second. That's a requirement. Anything else? Okay. Three quick things after I say thank you. Thank you for coming. I know it's time. I know it's a busy time of year, and I certainly appreciate your interest in finding this information. And that brings me to number one. Please do provide us your input on your way out. If you want to look at drawings of the concepts, they're out as you exit to the south. I will be here. I'll stay here as long as I need to tonight if you want to talk individually. If you want to have a meeting in my office or a group that you want me to talk to or would like the steering committee to talk to, we're eager to do that, and I can do that up till September the 9th. They can do it forever. Well, not forever, but at least till November. And be safe going home. Thanks for coming.